Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunati Ravanachari Yamunati Ravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunati Ravanachari Yamunati Ravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtottara Shatta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtottara Shatta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopakupinath Shyam Kund Radha Kundagiri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. My name is Alex. I am one of the monks here. I live upstairs. And today I'm going to be speaking on Bhagavad Gita, as it is. So we are reading from chapter 18, verse 65, very famous verse at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. So I'll just read the Sanskrit. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam mevaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. Namaskuru mam mevaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. And so the okay, I guess I'll read the translation and commentary by Srila Prabhupada. So the translation is, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. So, purport. The most confidential part of knowledge is that one should become a pure devotee of Krishna and always think of him and act for him. One should not become an official meditator. Life should be so molded that one will always have the chance to think of Krishna. One should always act in such a way that all his daily activities are in connection with Krishna. He should arrange his life in such a way that throughout the 24 hours of the day he cannot but think of Krishna. And the Lord's promise is that anyone who is in such pure Krishna consciousness will certainly return to the abode of Krishna, where he will be engaged in the association of Krishna face to face. This most confidential part of knowledge is spoken to Arjuna because he is the most dear friend of Krishna. Everyone who follows the path of Arjuna can become a very dear friend of Krishna and obtain the same perfection as Arjuna. These words stress that one should concentrate his mind upon Krishna, the very form with two hands carrying a flute, the bluish boy with a beautiful face and peacock feathers in his hair. There are descriptions of Krishna found in the Brahma Samhita and other literatures. One should fix his mind on this original form of Godhead, Krishna. One should not even divert his attention to other forms of the Lord. The Lord has multi-forms, such as Vishnu, Narayana, Rama, Varaha, etc. But a devotee should concentrate his mind on the form that was present before Arjuna. Concentration of the mind on the form of Krishna constitutes the most confidential part of knowledge. And this is disclosed to Arjuna because Arjuna is the most dear friend of Krishna's. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadurtam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanditangscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutterevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, this verse is a very famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita. It is coming in the 18th chapter titled The Perfection of Renunciation. And Prabhupada in the previous purport actually says that this verse, this instruction by Lord Krishna to his friend Arjuna is actually the most important instruction in all of the Vedic literatures. Not just in the Bhagavad Gita, but in the entire corpus of the Vedic literatures, this verse is the most important of all of them. Because Prabhupada says that in the purport that it's the most confidential part of knowledge. So, why is it so important? Well, we are all spirit, soul, jiva, part and parcel of the Lord. And we were originally with Him in the spiritual world. We're known as Tatastha Shakti, meaning we are spiritual, we are the Lord's energy. But sometimes we become covered over by the illusory energy of the Lord. So just like we see at the beach down here, there's a portion of the sand, which sometimes the water passes over it, the waves, they pass over it, and then sometimes they recede. So similarly, we as jivas in the Tatastha Shakti, we are sometimes susceptible to be covered by the illusory potency of the Lord, Maya, illusion. And so, somehow or other, due to some material desire, we've come in contact with the material nature, the modes of material nature. There's 3 modes of material nature. You have sattva gun, the mode of goodness, tamagun, the mode of ignorance, and rajagun, the mode of passion. So we have fell down from the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan, because we had some material desire, some desire to make it, to enjoy separately from the Lord. And so Krishna, he gives us free will. Prabhupada describes that Krishna doesn't want us to love him at the point of a revolver. So he gives us free will so that our love is voluntary. We voluntarily give love to the Lord, and that pleases him. Because otherwise, really there can be no love without free will. If we're not choosing to love, the Lord feels, wow, he's choosing me. He's choosing me over, so many things. And so this is pleasing to the Lord, or to anybody, that one may love. But this is a problem, actually, that we've come in contact with this material nature, because we still have a desire to enjoy. We still, the living entity's natural propensity is to desire. And so, if we don't desire the Lord, then we desire material sense gratification. And we see so much in this world. It's practically speaking, that's all there is. Unless you're very fortunate souls, as you are all here now, listening to the Bhagavad Gita. But otherwise, practically speaking, sense gratification is all that there is in this world. But unfortunately, the satisfaction that we desire, we can't get it from sense gratification. I'm a little bit hoarse. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, this is chapter 2, verse 62 and 63, describing the nature of sense gratification, the innate problem with sense gratification. Krishna says, Dhyato vishayan pungsa sangaste shubhajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho vijayate. And then verse 63, Krodhad bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibramaha smriti brahmashad buddhi nasho buddhi nashat pranashyati. So this describes the progression of material life pursuing material sense gratification. So Krishna says, while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When the memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, And when the intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So we can go through it briefly. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. This is all but natural. We are desiring something eternal. Naturally, our soul, the soul is Satchidananda. It's eternal. It's full of knowledge and full of bliss. And so we're desiring eternal pleasure. But unfortunately, sense gratification, material pleasure, it's all temporary. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that lust, it burns like fire, but it can never be satisfied. It can never be extinguished. Because all of the means for extinguishing it in this world are temporary. Sense gratification is temporary. Nothing is forever in this world. And so we become frustrated. So Krishna says, from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. This means from frustration of lust. Our lust becomes frustrated because we can't enjoy eternally. And so from lust, we become frustrated, and from this frustration, we become very deluded. And from this delusion, our memory is bewildered. We forget what's right and wrong. And when we forget what's right and wrong, our intelligence is lost, and again, we fall down into the material pool. And so we see this practically in the world, that people become deluded, they forget what's right and wrong, and they become attached, they become addicted to, actually, ugra karma. This is a term that's mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Ugra meaning rough, unpleasant, terrible, horrible. And karma meaning activities. So in this society, more so in the Western countries, there's a lot of cow killing. Cow killing has become very prominent, which is expressly against the Vedic literatures, because people have forgotten what's right and wrong. So they're killing cows and other animals because what is it for? It's for sense gratification. Simply to gratify their senses, they're maintaining slaughterhouses and very horribly killing many living beings. And they don't see what's wrong with it. Many people, they don't see anything wrong with it, actually. They think it's quite normal and actually quite enjoyable. So there's so many terrible things going on in the name of sense gratification. We don't have to go into it. But so Prabhupada, what's the result? What's the result of this? Prabhupada says, specifically in relation to cow killing, to maintaining slaughterhouses, that every few years there's a big war, and countless people are killed, and even more cruelly than these poor animals. And so this is the result. You know, the law of nature, karma. We have to reap what we sow in this world. So ultimately, materialistic life searching after happiness separate from Krishna, it ultimately just ends in suffering, because there is no happiness. There really is no happiness. It's very fleeting. Best case scenario, it lasts up until the time of death, which is, if you're lucky, about 80 years. And so, when we become addicted to sense gratification, we're bound up by this karma. We're constantly trying to, counteract the various miseries of this world. And so we keep acting. We're acting in pious ways, or acting in pious ways. But ultimately it's all karma. It's binding us to this world. It's material. And when we perform material activities, we have to come back. We have to take a material body, and we have to finish our business. Krishna allows us, gives us the facility to facilitate our material desires. And so, like this, we've been wandering in all these species of life from time immemorial. The Vedas describe 8.4 million forms of life. Some in higher planets, some in lower planets. But we've been wandering up and down these different higher births, lower births. And now we are very fortunate. We are very fortunate because we have the human form of life. We're in the material world with the human form of life. And it's a very rare form of life. We can only come to the human form of life after going through so many lower births. We come to the human form of life. And it's a very good opportunity. It's the ideal situation for breaking out of this cycle of birth and death, of karma, samsara, and going and being reinstated in our position as the eternal servant of Lord Krishna in the spiritual world. And this is because we have intelligence. We have animals. Human life, it's distinguished from animal life because we have the intelligence to understand Krishna, to understand God, to understand spiritual topics. We have discrimination. We have moral compass. All of these things that animals don't have. And we're also distinguished from the higher births in the heavenly planets, various Vaikuntha planets, because we're not so bewildered by material opulence. This world, it can be very bad, and it can be somewhat good. You can have opulence, but it's not as much opulence as you can have in the Vaikuntha planets, where you live for thousands and thousands of years. For instance, the life of Brahma and the life of those on Brahma Loka is 311 trillion years. They live for this long, and they're enjoying happiness, material sense gratification that we can't even imagine, actually. But it's difficult. It's difficult to remember Krishna because you become blinded by all this material opulence. So in this world, it can be good, but it's not so good. There's always, all the material happiness, it's served with a nice helping of suffering. And so the primary business of this human form of life is to remember God consciousness. This is the practice. This is Krishna consciousness, as Srila Prabhupada has given us. And so Krishna says in this verse, man mana, to always remember me, always think of me. And this means to remember Krishna constantly, to have his desire be a factor in everything that we do. And so, how? How do we do this? What's the process? The most important item is Shravanam. This is given in a verse by Prahlad Maharaj in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Pada Sevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam, Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. Those are the 9 processes of devotional service. I won't go through all of them. But the most important one of them is Shravanam, hearing, as we're all doing now, is to hear the holy name of Krishna, this Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So to give oral reception to the holy name, and to narrations of Krishna's pastimes, Shastra, Krishna's instructions. So like this, we should hear. But we must hear with a certain mood. And this mood is given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the incarnation of Krishna in this age, Kali Yuga, who inaugurated this Sankirtan movement of chanting the holy names of the Lord. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says, Chunadapi sunechena torori vasahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. So we should always feel more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, not expecting praise for ourselves, and always ready to give praise to others. And like this we'll be able to, he says, Kirtaniya Sadahari, like this we'll be able to always chant the holy name of Krishna, which means to always remember Krishna, always remember the Lord. And so we must hear submissively from an authorized source. Because actually this instruction, man mana, it's not simply actually a function of the memory. It's not a function of the memory, but it's an inclination of the heart, actually. We should hear from an authorized source, meaning a devotee of Krishna. Because we can hear many pastimes of Krishna, shlokas, recitations of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, etc., from, there's so many professional reciters. but they won't bestow onto you the goal of life, which is to love Krishna. The point is not simply to remember, but we have to remember with affection. We have to remember Krishna as his understanding that we are Krishnera Nitya Das. This is a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Jivera Sharuphoy Krishnera Nitya Das. We're all eternal servants of Krishna. And so we have to hear from an authorized source, meaning a devotee of Krishna, one who loves Krishna, because one who doesn't love Krishna can't bestow love for Krishna. You can't give what you don't have. And actually to love Krishna, bhakti, this is the only way. This is the only way to go back to Krishna. Krishna says, Bhaktya mama vijanati yavanyashasmi tatvadahattotamam tattatogat gyatva vishate tad anantaram. That to understand Krishna as he is, the only way is to by bhakti. And when we perform devotional service to Krishna bhakti, we become eligible to enter back into the kingdom of God. And so it's very important. And we should hear with a desire to increase our affection. We should hear submissively. And Prabhupada says in the purport, don't become an official meditator. Like I was mentioning, these professional reciters of Srimad Bhagavatam, they may recite very nicely. They may sing very nicely, they may recite shlokas very nicely, they may be very pukka Sanskritists, but they can't give love for Krishna, because love for Krishna can only be bestowed by a devotee of Krishna, one who already loves Krishna. And so, what's the nature of this love for Krishna? The proper mood should be anya bilashitash. This is a verse from Srila Rupa Goswami, a prominent disciple of one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, one of the prominent disciples of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he says, anya bhilashita shunyam jnana karma dhyanavritam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhakti ruttama. That one should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That's pure devotional service. And so this verse also brings up a good point. Krishna, in this verse, he doesn't only say manmana bhava mad bhakto, he also says madhyaji mam namaskuru. We also have to act for Krishna. We can tell the characteristic of one who's developing real love, real bhakti for Krishna, is that he acts. Naturally he'll act. If one loves Krishna, naturally he'll act in such a way which is favorable for the Lord's pleasure. And so our sincere endeavor to do this is bhakti. This is the definition of bhakti, to act favorably for the Lord's pleasure. And in order to do this, for a neophyte devotee, we have to act according to regulative principles. We have to act according to the instructions of Shastra. Meaning this process, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atma Nivedanam. So I guess I'll go through them very briefly. Shravanam is hearing, and this hearing, and then chanting. Chanting means repeating, memorizing, and then repeating. Smaranam means remembering, and also trying to understand deeper. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that Smaranam also means remembering, but also remembering and trying to understand deeper the instructions of Krishna. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada, Sevanam. So Pada, Sevanam, this is rendering service unto Krishna. So for example, you may cleaning the temple, and this is a service you may render to Krishna. Washing pots, so many, the pots that cook for the deities. So many different practical things we can do for Krishna. Manam Pada Sevanam, Archanam, worshipping the deity of Lord Krishna. Vandanam, offering obeisances to Lord Krishna, and understanding that we're his eternal servants. Dasyam, yes, this is understanding that we're his eternal servant. Sakhyam, this is an interesting one. This means becoming a friend of the Lord. Prabhupada says in the purport, everyone who follows the path of Arjuna can become a dear friend of Krishna and obtain the same perfection. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's commentary on this verse, he mentions that Sakhyam also, it means becoming a friend of Krishna. It means becoming a friend of Krishna. But this means doing something nice for Krishna, preaching, helping Krishna in his mission of saving the living entities in this world who have come in contact with the material nature. So yes, to help people understand Bhagavad Gita, to give Bhagavad Gita, to preach, to spread Krishna consciousness. Sakyam Atmanivedanam, to surrender everything, body, mind, words, activities, whatever one may possess, to the extent that they can. This is Atmanivedanam. And so when we do this, when we follow these regulative principles of devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, a devotee of Krishna, then Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. That Krishna gives us the intelligence, He gives us the understanding by which we can come to Him when we constantly devote Him, or are devoted to Him and serve Him with love, according to these regulative principles. And this is not just an instruction for big gurus and swamis, and this is an instruction for everyone. Prabhupada says in the purport, everyone who follows the path of Arjuna. This knowledge was given to us in Bhagavad Gita for everyone's benefit, for the world's benefit. Srila Rupa Goswami, in another verse, he says, Iha yasa hare dase karmana manasa gira nakhilashva pivastasu jivan mukta suchite. That regardless of one's circumstances, if he fully engages his mind, body, and words in the service of Lord Krishna according to regulative principles, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, then he should be understood to be liberated. Actually, he's beyond the modes of material nature. His existence is spiritualized. He's under the internal potency of the Lord. And we have so many examples of this. For instance, our own Srila Prabhupada, for the majority of his life, he was a householder. He had a wife, he had children, he had a business, he was a chemist, and he still always was absorbed in serving Krishna, always trying to preach, always trying to, translate books, and even his wife was very inimical to his preaching activities. There's one, his wife, she, at one point, she sold his Srimad Bhagavatam that he translated. She sold it for tea. She sold it to buy tea. And at one point, Prabhupada said, tea or me? He said to her, tea or me? You have to pick. And she said, tea. And so eventually, Srila Prabhupada, he took sannyas. Our great fortune that he did that. And he came to the West, and he came to the West with nothing. He had something like $7 and a Srimad Bhagavatam set, the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And now we see so many temples all over the world. And another example in our line is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was, so we have our Srila Prabhupada, and then his guru is Bhaktisiddhanta, and then Bhaktisiddhanta's guru is Gaura Kishore Das Babaji. And Gaura Kishore Das Babaji's Siksha guru, his instructing guru, is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he was a magistrate, actually. He was the highest position that an Indian could get in the British government at the time. Very important man, actually. A lot of responsibilities. He had many, many kids, one of which was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Saraswati Thakur. And he had a wife, but he was a pure devotee of the Lord. He was a very transcendental personality, always absorbed. And he wrote so many books propounding on the science of bhakti, Krishna bhakti. And so we can also implement this into our own lives, this aspect of pure devotional service. Prabhupada wanted that everyone in their homes, they sit down together, they do kirtan, they chant the holy names of the Lord, hear and chant, read Srimad Bhagavatam together with the family, and Bhagavad Gita, and like this, spiritualize the home, spiritualize the members of the family, and like this. And this Prabhupada wanted this introduced into every home, actually. And this was his request to the people of the world. And so to the extent that we do this, to the extent that we serve Krishna lovingly, menially, according to anyabhilashita shunyam, without desire for our own benefit, our own material benefit, to this extent we'll develop pure love for Krishna and we'll be eligible, we'll be invited back into Krishna's eternal Leela. And so we are being invited into something very special. Krishna's Leela is very, you can hear about it in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's eternally blissful. And this is our natural, this is the only way that we'll be satisfied, actually. This is the satisfaction of the soul, to be reinstated in our constitutional position as the eternal servant of the Lord. And so it's very important that we take up the process and we are serious about it. So are there any questions or comments, realizations?
Could you please elaborate on Atmanivedana a little more?
Atmanivedana, okay. So to surrender...
Self,
Yeah, so to surrender mind, body, and words, to surrender your entire self. So, there's a verse in the Upadeshamrita by Srila Rupa Goswami. I'm forgetting Sanskrit now, but it describes, Atyahara priyasascha prajalpanyamagraha janasangash chalalyam cha shadbir bhakti pranashiti. So we should, Prabhupada says in the purport that we should mold our life in such a way that we always have a chance to think of Krishna. And we won't be able to do that if we're not surrendered. So for example, when we should always act for Krishna. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that whatever you're doing, do it as a sacrifice for me, as an offering to me. So whatever you're doing, we should always be thinking of Krishna's pleasure, and in this way we can surrender our body to Krishna. And also Krishna says, practically speaking, we can offer obeisances. We can bow down to Krishna. This is a practical way of surrendering our body. And so the austerity of the body is to act for Krishna always, and act in such a way that he's pleased, and always to serve him. And so mind also, to always think of Krishna, always think of him lovingly, always remember his instructions, and to always take them into account. The Christians, they have a saying, what would Jesus do? So we can think, what would Krishna do? What would Krishna want me to do? What would my guru want me to do? What would Prabhupada want me to do? And we can always try to think in such a way. Think of things we can do practically for Krishna. And so mind, body, and words. This is mentioned in this verse. Prajalpo niyam, prajalpo. Prajalpo means unnecessary talking. So to speak of Krishna, Krishna katha, it's very purifying. To always speak of Krishna and to chant the holy name of the Lord. Srila Rupa goes atyahara priyasascha. So over collecting. I guess I'll go to this first since I mentioned atyahara priyasascha. Over collecting money, over collecting material things, and not using them, in service of Krishna. We're not against money. We're not against money necessarily, but it's money is Lakshmi. So we should always offer Lakshmi to Vishnu. Lakshmi and Vishnu, they should always be together. Lakshmi is always serving. So we're not against money. There was Prabhupada commented one time, there was a picture of a famous yogi. Some impersonalist yogi, wasn't a Vaishnava. But there was, a picture, he's in front of a big pile of money, and you see he goes like this, Prabhupada said, if that was me, I'd go like this, give it all to me. Give it all to me, I'll build a temple, I'll print books, this and that. So we're not against money, but atyahara means collecting things for oneself, for one's own sense gratification. Prajalpo niyamagraha, prajalpo unnecessary speaking. Niyamagraha. So niyamagraha means fanaticism, to follow the rules and regulations of Shastra without, practicality. So following too strictly. For example, this a good example is ahimsa. Ahimsa, so the non-violence. So one following too strictly, you see somebody being attacked or you see somebody being harassed, and you say, I'm not going to intervene because I'm non-violent. Hare Krishna. Or like Arjuna. Arjuna was saying, I can't fight, I can't. But Krishna's saying, no, you should fight. This is my desire. So to not follow so strictly, to understand practically the practical application of Shastra. But the other side of Niyamagraha is to not follow at all, to speculate, to concoct processes, to concoct things. Janasangascha lalyangcha, to associate with people who are materialistic. We should give this up. And if we don't give this up, then Shadbir Bhakti Pranashati. Our bhakti is finished. Our love for Krishna. We can't develop love for Krishna. So that's what I would say to that. Is there anything further? Dr. Tyler?
You highlighted how important this shloka is in the context of the whole Gita. And what's the last sentence of this shloka?
Pratijane priyosime.
Which is?
Pratijane is I promise. Priyosime, I promise is because you are very dear to me.
And you listed in those processes of devotional service the importance of becoming a friend of Krishna. And Arjuna is his friend, and he's saying very dear to him. So is there some significance to that aspect of why this important instruction he's saying at the end, you're my friend?
Yeah. Well, Krishna's giving this knowledge. Well, there's a verse, Bhaktarang yagitapasang sarvalok maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatmamam. Suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatmamam shanti mrichati. So this verse, one in full consciousness of me, know me to be the beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, Bhaktarang yagitapasang. Sarvalok maheshwaram, the supreme lord of all planets and all demigods thereof. And the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. So Krishna is our most dear friend, Suhridam. He is our most dear friend. We won't find a friend like Krishna in this world. There's nobody. Krishna is within our heart. He's as Paramatma. He comes to this world with us, from the spiritual world. He comes to this world with us, to guide us. He's always there to guide us. And so we should similarly reciprocate with him. We should reciprocate with that friendship. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, like I mentioned earlier, in his commentary on Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, this verse from Prahlad Maharaj, he says that becoming a friend of Krishna means to do nice things for him, to help him. And practically this means to preach, to help give out Bhagavad Gita, give out Krishna's instructions, help people to understand, save people. Help. Krishna's in the business, he's in the business of saving us in this material world. And so we should help him with that. Is that satisfactory?
Thank you, Prabhu. So we'll go to the Tulsi Puja.
Okay. Hare Krishna.